The modern European Union is a far cry from its humble beginnings. Originally focused on coal, steel and later trade, the EU is now a major global superpower with control over many important areas of policy. However, over 40 years after Britain's entry, is it now time to leave the EU?
A UK government report in 2011 stated that, due to extra trade, the EU provides up to £3,300 in benefits for every EU citizen. Why would anyone want to change that? The EU is vital for our economy and to protect British prosperity for the future.
Being a member of the EU sets Britain back £118 billion, and the money that the EU pays the UK to cover this is only around £2 to £3 billion, resulting in a massive chunk out of the UK governmental budget.
Another advantage of the EU is the right to move freely through the 28 member states. This means it's easier to go on holiday or to work abroad if we want to. And immigrants help fill jobs in specialist sectors such as our NHS.
Although the EU has a freedom of movement policy, this doesn't necessarily lead to a freedom of labour because of language and cultural differences. Also, the net migration of 200,000 citizens into the UK every year has led to inflated house prices, and the UK is powerless to stop immigration due to EU laws.
One of the most important facets of the EU is its free trade policy. The EU can trade unrestricted with all 27 other member states, and this free trade is vital to our economic growth.
Although free trade can be seen to lead to economic growth, it can also lead to serious pollution and environmental problems that over time will cost governments billions.
Without the EU, how can we protect ourselves from criminals? Thousands of criminals are arrested every year with the European arrest warrant. Why risk losing that advantage?
Individual countries can deal with crime by themselves, as they have done for centuries. They do not require the EU to do it for them, and it is a waste of money for the EU to do so.
What about the laws on pollution? The EU has made marine pollution a crime, introduced air pollution restrictions and worked to create a greener continent.
The EU has done good work for pollution laws, but more needs to be done to combat the global issues of climate change. Ultimately, the EU needs to inspire global change, and the current approach is not well suited to this task.
Lastly, look at the EU's commitment to human rights. The European Court of Human Rights protects every citizen from being mistreated. In fact, in 2012, the EU received the Nobel Peace Prize for Human Rights.
The UK already introduced the Human Rights Act in 1998, and therefore any human rights violations should be dealt with by British judges, who have a greater understanding of the British legal system than European judges.
The EU makes a valuable contribution to defence. The 18 European battle groups act as rapid response units. They can intervene to prevent war crime and deal with terrorist threats.
The EU battle groups divert money from more worthwhile causes such as social welfare and lowering housing costs. Also, they can only be used in very small conflicts and therefore aren't cost effective or as useful as national armies.
But remember how much work the EU does on humanitarian aid. In 2013, it provided €1.35 billion in aid and helped deal with dozens of global crises over the last few years, for example the Haitian crisis.
The UK already meets its aid target of 0.7% of GDP, providing useful and sustainable support for countries around the world in dealing with natural disasters. It is better for national governments to use aid to create trade links and form alliances for the future. These are just some of the many varied and complex arguments surrounding the EU. So what do you think? Is the EU vital for the UK to remain economically strong, or would Britain be fine by itself?
I'm for EU. It brought us peace, trade and 4 million jobs.
I want major reforms to the EU so that it meets the challenges of the 2050s, not look back to the ideals of the 1950s.
My name's Annalisa Dodds. I'm a Labour MEP for the South East of England, and I'm pro-EU because we're safer, stronger and more prosperous when we're together.